Hello and welcome as usual back to the channel for the first Assetto Corsa setup guide, and this time we're doing the special event in the Bentley Continental GT 2019 model, and it's going to be a first for me, this one. I wasn't sure whether I was ready to do any setup videos since the force feedback and the lag within the game is still suffering quite heavily. Obviously you've just got to take that into account, I think, on this one, and just remember that this isn't my out and out flat out pace. I'm getting very little force feedback through the wheel, although during the video I was just watching how much clipping there's supposed to be coming through my unit, but there definitely isn't enough force feedback to feel any sort of clipping at the moment. But yeah, let's take a look at my fastest lap. Managed to get into the 157s finally after numerous adjustments and quite a bit of learning on my own behalf, really. Obviously very new to the game at this stage, and definitely wanting to bring more setup guides to the channel as per usual. But obviously this is a first, it's a learning curve for me. Numerous areas of the setup I'm still getting used to myself. So let's dive in, take a look at my lap flat out, and then we'll come back and have a look at the setup.
Low tire pressure, stay clear of the curbs.
There we go, a flat out lap of Silverstone. Really enjoyed that. Yes, let's get into this setup. Obviously the hot tyre needs to be running at around 27.5 psi, but just bringing down the front temperatures a little bit to try and combat a little bit of understeer that I was getting through the car, definitely through some of the slower corners. The camber made small adjustments to the camber. Obviously you can see that one side of the car is slightly offset by 1 degree for the camber. And moving to the traction control, I definitely recommend using this on 5. I have tried it on 4, but I just feel it's, especially out of some of the slower corners, it's just too much. Moving on to the brakes, using the number 1 for the brakes. I think this is recommended for hot lapping. The other types of brakes are really, I think it's a bigger disc or a bigger pad that's going to last you a lot longer throughout the race, but for the hot lap we use a smaller disc. I went slightly harder on the front and then gradually started to soften out the springs and adjusted the bump stops as well. This was something that was recommended, I forget, Avis I think his name is. I'll put a link to his videos or his channel in my video somewhere, but his channel is definitely worth one to look at. But trying to run the bump stops as low as they go, that red line, this adjusts on the telemetry next to the spring. The front suspension should have the red line as close to the yellow line as possible. A few tiny adjustments to the springs really, and they are subtle adjustments. There seem to be in Assetto Corsa, just slightly softening the suspension all round really, but more so I think through the front than at the rear. But it is, like I say, it's early days for me doing the setup on this. And moving to the preload, this was something I spent quite a lot of time on really within this setup. Just trying to get my head around doing a setup. I wasn't planning on doing a setup, but I tried it down on 20 and I was still able to get a 148 lap, and just gradually progressed all the way up to about 120. From there onwards, I've not really tried any further. It just felt comfortable in and around that figure. So looking at the bump stops, bump or rebound and stuff, just change the bump and the rebound, just slightly softening both at the front and at the rear. There's one particular section throughout this lap that's so bumpy. I just thought it really needed softening out. Obviously there's a heck of a lot goes on through the aerodynamics on this simulator, and raising and lowering the ride height makes a massive difference to how the car handles, especially through the high speed corners. I spent quite a bit of time on this, just looking at how much effect raising the car at the rear was going to have on the aero balance, just using the figure underneath the car. So I would lower this and I would raise it, just trying to get a feel for how this is affecting the car on the whole. Most of the adjustment really does come from the rear ride height. Obviously you sort of add in what's called the rake on the car, where the nose is sort of diving down into the tarmac. That's generally referred to as the rake of the car, but didn't really mess with the rear wing that much either. Tried lowering it to about 6 and adjusting the ride height accordingly, but never really got any benefit from that. And then the brake pads, just adjusting those to get temperature wise, 1 at the rear and I think 3 at the front. So let's take a slow drive around the circuit. So coming up to turn 1 then, and we're going to be flat out in 5th gear, just looking for the last board on the left, the 50 board, and we're going to brake a tiny bit before that and try and take as much of the grass as you can, allowing the car to run out wide, not too wide or you will take a track penalty for that. Flat out into here, just going to drop into 4th gear as you come through here. I have tried carrying 5th, but 4th I think is much better to slow the car down, getting as nice and tight on that left hand side as you can and coming across, taking as much of the green stuff as you can. Horrible bumpy section through there. Just trying to get the car planted through that section is really awkward, trying to get this suspension to work properly. Braking just before the board, the checkered lines on the left hand side, and trying to get down into 3rd and take as much of a closer line to the apex as you can, and looking for the checkered line on the right hand side again where we start braking, down into 1st gear for this corner and then quickly up to 2nd, a tiny lift of the accelerator, then back just progressively onto the accelerator pedal. The car does have a tendency to want to use a traction control there, up into 5th gear, and just I sort of see where the corner of the apex hits the corner of the bonnet is where I try and start looking to drop down into 4th gear for that corner. Looking again on the checkered on the left hand side to brake down into 1st, try and hit that apex stay right at this one so you can get a nice swing round up into second and then quickly into first. Get right out on the right hand side for that one. Just let the car drift out and accelerate as much as you can. Just being progressive, I guess, on the throttle as you come out of there before you're absolutely nailing it. Looking at the board on the right hand side to break down into second gear, just sort of slowly coming down through the gears as you progressively get tighter through the apex, and then hugging this one really nice and tightly, accelerating early because the traction control is going to want to kick in, and just trying to build up the acceleration. So let's take a little bit of a flying lap now, not at full speed, so just braking at the 50 board. Get the car to come in, take as much of the grass as you can, just allow the car to drift out wide, up into fifth gear. Like I said, just dropping down into fourth for this one as you come through the corner itself, braking in a straight line, hugging the left hand side, into third, hugging the right hand side as much as you can, let the car run wide, and then up into fourth gear. Take the car as much as you can through the rev range, probably into the yellow really before you're looking to change gear. Never reaching sixth gear, just before the checkered section on the left hand side, braking, hugging nice and deeply, turning the car using the brake pedal really through that section. Looking for the checkered curbs on the right hand side again where we start braking, down into first gear, get the car nice and straight, up into second gear, tiny lift and then back on the throttle. You can run wide there, but not too wide. That was probably about as wide as you'd want to run unless you go off the circuit. Like I said, looking for the apex at the tip of the bonnet and then just braking down into fourth gear. It's like a tiny touch of the brake pedal just to swing the nose in, and then up into fifth gear, looking for the checkers on the left hand side again, braking down into first, getting the car swung out to the right and then back into the left, trying to pick up that apex. Let the car run nice and wide, and the traction control will be kicking in. Just try and be progressive with that. Like I say, if you can handle fourth gear, you'll probably get better accelerate fourth on the traction control, but I do recommend using fifth. Just swinging round into here, hugging it nice and tightly, and then this is so important to get a nice line through here and get on the accelerator nice and early. You see it's in the yellow, using the traction control. But number 5 is definitely recommended, and number 4 on the ABS. So really enjoyable lap. I've enjoyed driving the Bentley, enjoying the game, even with the force feedback as it is at the moment. Just trying to learn as much as I can to pass on to the community. Loving the animation as well during the pit stop. It's so nice to see the guys actually go to work around the car, and just the process of getting the tyres on. It does look quite intricate, well planned by the guys as well. This wasn't something during a hot lap, but it was just something I thought was very interesting to see. It's not something that's done in any other game, I don't think, where you actually see the pit crew go to work during the replay. And he stands and gives me the thumbs up, get the engine started again, get it dropped off its jacks, and then away we go. I do actually get a pit penalty for speeding in the pit lane there as well, just on the exit. I didn't quite engage the pit limiter. A little bit disappointed to see that there isn't very much smoke from the tyres. Just thought I'd let it rip just to see how much smoke we get, and quite disappointing. But thanks for watching the video, guys. Hopefully I'll get more setup guides done in the future as and when the game gets patched and the force feedback sorted out. So until then, ciao for now.